There's a specific dollar amount sitting in your investment account right now, or not sitting in it, which is the problem. And once you cross it, the math permanently shifts in your favor. Not gradually, permanently. And the number is not $1 million. It's not even close to $1 million. But here's the part that should bother you. The financial industry has spent 40 years giving you goals that land just far enough away from this threshold to keep you dependent on their services. Let me tell you about 3 numbers. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will look at your portfolio balance differently than you did this morning. The median American between 55 and 64 years old has $185,000 in retirement savings, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. 185,000. The number Americans say they need to retire comfortably in 2026, fresh data, just published, is $1.46 million. That gap is not a rounding error. That's a structural failure. And the wild part is that most of the people stuck in that gap made all the conventional moves. They opened the 401k. They stayed in the market. They read the articles. And they are still standing at the bottom of a hill, pushing a snowball that is not going anywhere because nobody told them that the snowball needs to reach a certain size before the hill does the work. That is the only metaphor I am going to use in this video. The snowball and the hill. Because it is not a cute analogy, it is literally how compound interest functions. And once you understand the 3 sizes the snowball needs to reach, everything else becomes obvious. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why the most important number in your financial life is not the one you retire with, it is the one you need to cross before compounding starts doing the heavy lifting. But first, here's why the advice you got before this video is probably working against you. The standard retirement advice goes like this. Max your 401k. Invest in index funds. Wait until 65. That is it. That is the whole plan. And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem is what that plan hides. It treats the accumulation phase as linear, like you are filling a bucket. Pour money in, bucket fills up, retire, pour money out. But that is not how compounding works. Compounding is not linear. It is exponential. And exponential growth has a shape. It is flat for a long time. Then it bends. And then it goes nearly vertical. The bucket analogy will get you to the flat part and then leave you wondering why nothing is happening. The snowball analogy shows you exactly where the bend is. Here's the thing. I have spent the better part of a decade watching accountants and lawyers model money. Not my money in theory, actual money, real portfolios, the kind of math that happens after the seminars are over and the PowerPoints are closed. And the one thing that never shows up in the marketing materials is this. There are 3 specific dollar thresholds where something mathematically significant changes, and they have nothing to do with how much you earn. Let me start with what most people get backwards. People think the goal is to save more. That is the wrong frame. The goal is to reach the size where the snowball rolls on its own. Until you cross the first threshold, you are essentially the snowball. You are providing all the momentum. Every dollar of growth in your portfolio is coming from your labor. You are renting out your future time to generate your present capital. That is not a bad thing, but it is not wealth. Wealth is when the snowball is bigger than you. Here is the first threshold, $100,000. At 10% annual returns, and the S&P 500 has returned 10.12% over the last 30 years, according to data tracked through February 2026, a portfolio of $100,000 earns $10,000 per year, completely passively. The average employee contributed $9,080 to their 401k in 2025, according to Fidelity's data on 24.5 million plan participants. That means at exactly $100,000 saved, your portfolio begins earning more per year than the average American is actively putting in. Let that sit for a second. You are still contributing, you are still working, but mathematically, the snowball has started rolling on its own. For the first time in your financial life, you have a second job that does not require your presence. The problem is, most people blow past this number without noticing it because it does not feel like anything. Your account balance went from 98,000 to 102,000 and nothing changed. No alarm went off, your advisor did not call. You just quietly crossed the line where your money became more productive per year than you are in dollar terms, contributing to it. Now, here is where it gets really interesting. Think about the person who hits 100,000 and then stalls. They get there in their mid-30s, life gets expensive, kids, mortgage, the car that needed to be replaced in the worst possible month, and they stop contributing for 2 or 3 years. The snowball was rolling, but the hill was not steep enough yet. At 10% on 100,000, you earn 10,000 a year. Great. But if you pull your contributions, that 10,000 gets taxed or it gets absorbed into a market that goes sideways for a year. You feel like you are not making progress. This is the valley of despair in compound interest. You hit the first threshold and then you run out of hill before the second one. The second threshold is the one the financial industry does not talk about, and it is the one that should be on every retirement calculator in America. $250,000. In 2026, the maximum amount you can contribute to a 401k is $24,500 per year. That is the legal ceiling. The most you're allowed to shovel into the snowball annually. At 10% returns, a portfolio of $250,000 earns $25,000 per year, more than your maximum legal contribution. Think about what that means. The government has a ceiling on how much you can save. The market does not. Once you cross $250,000, the market is doing more for your retirement every single year than the law allows you to do yourself. Your contribution becomes irrelevant compared to the compounding. You are not the snowball anymore. The hill is the snowball. You are the person who got it rolling. But there is a subplot to this story that I want to introduce right now because it will matter later. His name is Dave. Dave is not a real person, but he is at every neighborhood barbecue you have ever been to. Dave is 44. He has $182,000 saved, a number that looks reasonable, sounds reasonable, and is causing Dave a quiet, persistent anxiety he cannot fully name. Dave has been doing everything right for 15 years. He maxes his 401k most years. He has a low-cost index fund. He reads the articles, but Dave is stuck between the first and second threshold, and the snowball is rolling on a flat surface. Dave is about to understand something that will either devastate him or change everything, depending on what he does next. We will come back to Dave. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you about the third threshold is the number that financial advisors almost never show you, and the reason why is more interesting than the number itself. I want to stop here for a second and address something that is probably forming in the back of your mind. You are thinking, the S&P 500 does not return 10% every year. Some years it drops 20. Some years it drops 40. 1999 to 2009 was a lost decade. You are right. But the question I am actually asking is not about any single year. It is about the shape of the curve over time. And the data is consistent across 100-year windows, 50-year windows, 30-year windows. The 30-year average as of February 2026 is 10.12%. The 50-year average is 11.71%. Even adjusted for inflation, the 30-year real return is 7.43%. Even the inflation-adjusted number gets you to critical thresholds. At 7% real returns, you need roughly $350,000 to beat your maximum contribution every year. The timeline is longer, but the curve still bends. It always bends. The hill always gets steeper. Your only job is to get the snowball to the right size. Here is a parable. A family in rural Japan in the 1700s had a rice field that produced 1 kilogram of rice per season. Every year they planted, harvested, and had exactly 1 kilogram. Useful, predictable, linear. Their neighbor had a different system. He planted half his harvest, which meant smaller meals in the first years. But the portion that got replanted grew every season. By year 11, his field was producing 12 times what it had been in year 1. The family with the linear field thought their neighbor was foolish. They had rice today. He was always sacrificing. By year 15, the planting neighbor had enough rice to stop working the field himself and hire someone else to do it. You are the planting neighbor. Your contributions are the seeds. The field does not pay off until it is large enough, and the first 10 years are genuinely uncomfortable. Now, I said the financial industry does not talk about the third threshold. Let me tell you why. The third threshold is $580,000. At 10% returns, $580,000 earns $58,000 per year. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports the average full-time salary for workers 25 to 34 years old was $57,564 in late 2010, 24, which means at $580,000 invested, your portfolio earns more per year than the average American earns at work. Your money has replaced your labor. Not as a metaphor, literally, in terms of annual dollar output. This is what financial independence actually means. Not zero withdrawals, not zero expenses, not a paid-off house in some special tax state. It means the snowball generates more momentum per year than you generate by showing up somewhere. And the frustrating thing is that the standard retirement advice, max your 401k, wait until 65, does eventually get you there. But it gets you there at 64, when you have roughly 30 active years left. The question I care about is whether you can get there in your late 40s or early 50s when you still have the energy to use it. By the way, hit subscribe if you like this content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. And here is the problem you think is a problem, but is actually not the real problem. You think the problem is that you are not earning enough to save enough. That is the wrong frame. The real problem is that you have been spending money that should be inside the snowball on things that provide zero compounding. And the most expensive of those things is a financial advisor charging a percentage of your assets every year. Here is the math, and I want you to really hear this. A 1% annual fee on a $1 million portfolio, earning 7% over 30 years, costs you $1.3 million in lost compounding, compared to a 0.25% all-in alternative. That is not conjecture. That is arithmetic. $1 million at 7% over 30 years with 0.25% fees grows to roughly $7 million. The same portfolio at 1% fees grows to roughly $5.7 million. The gap between those two outcomes, $1 million and $300,000, is not the fee. It is the compound effect of the fee dragging on every year's reinvestment base. A 1% mutual fund fee alone, separate from the advisor, could cost a young investor $590,000 over 40 years due to compounding, according to analysis from financial platform Metzi. You are not losing 1% per year. You are losing the compounding on 1% per year for the rest of your life. And this matters specifically in the context of the thresholds I just described, because the fees have the biggest impact right at the moment your snowball is trying to pick up speed. When you are between the first and second threshold, between 100,000 and 250,000, you are in the most fragile part of the curve. Your compounding is real, but still small in absolute terms. A 1% fee at this stage is not just a cost. It is a delay. It is a tax on your acceleration. It pushes the second threshold further away. And for every year you do not cross the second threshold, you are still the person providing the momentum, not the market. Knowing where these thresholds are and actually having a system built around reaching them are two very different things. I spent years running a business surrounded by people who understood the mechanics of this. Accountants, lawyers, people who read tax codes for a living. And even with that context, building a personal framework that mapped to real numbers took actual work. That is why I wrote The Exit Code. It is a digital book built on 50 years of actual retirement data. Not opinion, not vibes, not motivational phrasing. It is 8 chapters of pure research distilled into a mathematical framework that takes the question of when can I stop depending on my labor and gives you a specific date, not a range, a date. 2 of the elements that most directly connect to what we are discussing today are the dynamic withdrawal method, which replaces the 4% rule with something the data actually supports over long time horizons, and the analysis I call the unretirement paradox, which looks at why 81% of early retirees in one specific FIRE community went back to work within 3 years, and why it had nothing to do with running out of money. Understanding why that happened is the difference between building toward the 3rd threshold with a system versus stumbling across it and losing momentum immediately after. You can get the exit code through the link in the description for less than you spend on dinner. That math compounds too. Now back to Dave. Dave has $182,000, and I want you to understand exactly where Dave is on the curve. At 10% returns, Dave earns about $18,200 per year in compounding. That is real. That is not nothing. But Dave's maximum legal contribution is $24,500. Dave is still under the 2nd threshold. The market is contributing less per year than Dave can legally contribute himself. Dave is still, mathematically, the primary force in his own wealth building. The snowball is moving, but Dave is still pushing. Now watch what happens if Dave gets aggressive for 3 more years. He stops the lifestyle creep. He pays off the car. He adds another $8,000 per year above what he was doing. In 3 years, at 10% compounding, Dave goes from $182,000 to approximately $273,000. He has crossed the 2nd threshold. The market now contributes more annually to his account than he can legally shovel in. For the first time, Dave can slow down his contributions, and the snowball still grows faster than he was growing it manually. That is not a metaphor. The numbers support it. There is a specific thing that happens psychologically when you cross the 2nd threshold that I do not think gets discussed enough. Before you cross it, investing feels like sacrifice. Every contribution is something you did not spend. The gratification is always delayed, always theoretical, always someday. After you cross it, investing stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like observation. You check the account because it is interesting, not because you are anxious. The 10% annual gain on a $250,000 portfolio is $25,000. That is a number large enough that you can feel it. It is bigger than many people's annual bonuses, and you did absolutely nothing to earn it. Not a meeting, not a commute, not an email. The hill rolled the snowball. This is also the moment when the psychology of money shifts from spending avoidance to asset building. Before the 2nd threshold, the primary lever is spend less. After the 2nd threshold, the primary lever is lose less to fees, taxes, and withdrawal mistakes. The game is different. The skills required are different. And almost no retirement content I have seen makes that transition clear. Let me give you the mini case study, because I want to make this as concrete as possible. Meet Rachel. She is 38, she earns $92,000 per year, and has been contributing about 14% of her income to her 401k since she was 31. 7 years of consistent investing. She has just crossed $112,000 in her investment account. She is past the 1st threshold. Her account now earns approximately $11,200 per year at 10%. That is more than she was contributing 5 years ago. Rachel has 2 choices. Choice 1, she keeps contributing at the same rate and waits. At her current trajectory, she reaches the 2nd threshold, $250,000, in approximately 7 years at 45. At 45, her account is doing more work than she is. At 55, assuming she maintains this and does not touch the account, she is at approximately $650,000. She has crossed the 3rd threshold. Her portfolio earns more per year than her salary. Choice 2. Rachel realizes she is close to the second threshold and gets intentional. She trims one major expense. She was spending $3,800 per year on a gym membership and classes she used occasionally, and she redirects it. She pays down a 4% interest debt, freeing up another $1,200 monthly in cash flow. She increases her annual investment contribution by $9,000. She also eliminates her managed mutual fund with a 1.2% expense ratio and moves to a Vanguard index fund at 0.03%. That fee reduction alone on $112,000 over the next 20 years saves her approximately $68,000 in compounding drag. Rachel, in choice 2, crosses the second threshold, not at 45, but at 42, 3 years earlier. Those 3 years matter, not because she retires 3 years earlier. She might not, but because the third threshold comes at 51 instead of 55. 4 more years of the snowball rolling on its own. On the aggressive path, Rachel's portfolio at 55 is not $650,000, it is closer to $900,000. The difference between choice 1 and choice 2 is not effort. It is understanding the geometry of the curve. Now here's something that will probably make you uncomfortable. The reason most people do not make choice 2 is not financial. It is psychological. When you are at $112,000, you do not feel rich. You feel like you are doing okay. You feel like the decisions you are making at the margin, the gym membership, the managed fund, the car payment, are personal decisions, lifestyle decisions, financially small. But you are at the steepest leverage point in your entire investing life. Every dollar that flows out of your account at $112,000 has to be replaced by your labor and loses all of its compounding potential. Every dollar that stays in accelerates toward the second threshold. The math at this stage is more sensitive than at any other point in your investing life. This is not a spending problem. It is a geometry problem. You are in the flattest, most frustrating section of an exponential curve. The Fidelity data from late 2025 makes this visible in aggregate. The average balance for people who have been investing continuously for 15 years was $617,600. For people investing continuously for 10 years, it was $465,000. That gap, $152,000 for 5 more years, is not because they saved more in years 11 through 15. It is because they crossed the second threshold somewhere in year 11 or 12, and the snowball took over. Here's the punchline. If you think the problem is your income, you are wrong. The National Institute on Retirement Security found that the median savings for all employed American workers between 21 and 64, including those with savings, was $955. $955, not 955,000. $955. That is a snowball the size of a marble. And the reason is not that those people cannot save. Some of them cannot. But many of them are caught in a loop where every dollar they earn feels immediately necessary, and the concept of a threshold, a specific number, where the behavior of money changes permanently, has never been explained to them with a number attached. And here is the second punchline. 54% of American households report having no dedicated retirement savings, according to the Federal Reserve. 54%. Yet the total national retirement nest egg grew to $49.1 trillion as of December 2025. That is not a contradiction. That is a distribution problem. The people who understand the thresholds and cross them are pulling an enormous percentage of that number. Everyone else is the flat part of the curve, wondering why compound interest is not working for them. The answer is, it is not working for them because they have not reached the size yet. 3 practical takeaways that apply specifically to what we covered today. First, calculate which threshold you are at right now, not which threshold you are working toward. Open your brokerage statement and multiply your balance by 0.1. That number is what the market gives you annually at 10% returns. If that number is less than your maximum allowable contribution, you are still below the second threshold, and your primary lever is not investment selection, it is acceleration. Fee reduction, debt payoff, contribution increases. Every year below the second threshold that you spend optimizing fund selection instead of accelerating principal is a year of slope you are wasting. Second, eliminate anything that creates compounding drag on your portfolio between the first and second threshold. A 1% fee on a $100,000 portfolio is $1,000 per year. In a single year, that sounds manageable. Over 30 years, that same $1,000, if it had stayed invested at 10%, would have grown to $17,450. That is not the fee. That is the compounding on the fee. Multiply that across every year between the first and second threshold, and you will understand why the difference between a 0.03% expense ratio and a 1.2% managed fund is not an aesthetic choice. It is a structural one. Third, understand that crossing the third threshold, the $580,000 mark, where your portfolio earns more than the average American salary, requires no genius, no trading skill, no private equity access, and no luck. It requires time inside a low-cost index fund. That is it. Fidelity data from the fourth quarter of 2025 shows that the average balance for continuous 15-year investors was $617,600. Those people did not beat the market. They did not pick individual stocks. They stayed put. The snowball found its own hill. The hill did the work. A word about the 4% rule while I am here, because it is the most widely cited retirement framework, and it has a specific failure mode that connects directly to everything I described. The 4% rule says you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually in retirement without running out of money over 30 years. The problem is that the study it is based on, the Trinity study from 1998, used historical data from a specific interest rate environment that no longer exists, and it was designed for a 30-year retirement horizon. If you cross the third threshold at 51, like Rachel does in our case study, you have a potential 40-year retirement horizon. The 4% rule has a meaningful failure rate at that horizon in adverse market sequences. But that is a video for another day. What I spent 10 years learning from accountants and lawyers. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The guy who bought Bitcoin in 2017 and sold it in 2022 made nothing. The guy who put $20,000 a year into an S&P 500 index fund in 2017 and never looked at it, he crossed the second threshold while you were refreshing CoinMarketCap. There is nothing exciting about the snowball until the hill gets steep. Math verification notes used in script. The average yearly return of the S&P 500 is 10.121% over the last 30 years, as of the end of February 2026. Assuming dividend reinvestment, the average balance for savers who've been investing the same 401k continuously for 15 years was $617,600 and $465,000 for those saving for 10 straight years. According to Fidelity's fourth quarter 2025 data, the median American age 55-64 has $185,000 in retirement savings. 28% have nothing at all. The magic number Americans think they need to retire comfortably in 2026 is $1.46 million. Median savings for all employed adults between the ages of 21 and 64 amounted to $955, according to data from the U.S. Census Bureau's Survey of Income and Program Participation. The average employee contribution was $9,080 in 2025, up from $8,810 in 2024 per Fidelity. For tax year 2026, the maximum amount you can contribute to your 401k is $24,500. On a $1M portfolio, earning 7% per year gross, at a 0.25% all-in cost, the portfolio grows to roughly $7. 0M over 30 years, at a 1% all-in cost, roughly $5. 7M at 2%, roughly $4. 4M. The gap between 0.25% and 1% over 30 years is roughly $1.03M on a $1M starting balance. A 1% mutual fund fee alone could cost a young investor as much as $590,000 over 40 years due to the effects of compounding. Over half of American households, 54%, report having no dedicated retirement savings, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. Retirement assets accounted for 34% of all household financial holdings in the US. As of December 2025, the $49.1 trillion national nest egg grew by $3.3 trillion from the third quarter of 2025. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports the average salary for full-time workers ages 25 to 34 was $57,564 in the third quarter of 2024. All the way up until year 10, savings is more important than compounding with respect to annual increases to net worth, after which the balance